So tell me, Meg, so when did you get coronavirus, and tell us your story. How did you figure out that you had it?
I started sort of feeling badly on, let's say, a Saturday. I almost never get a temperature. It's very uncharacteristic for me. And so while it wasn't high, it was unusual. Went to bed that night, slept really well. Next day, got up, kind of felt almost normal that all day that second day. Evening came, felt a little bit worse, and thought I would march myself to urgent care, see if it might just be the flu. I was waiting, hoping that that thing was going to come back for the flu. It came back negative for both. So from there, I walked out and thought, and I remember walking home and thinking, okay, I'm a substitute teacher for the New York City public school system for elementary schools. I had taught in 3 separate schools prior week to that. All those kids who had just been given off 4 weeks of school and might be going home and heading to their grandparents' house. So then my test came back positive, and I was honestly flabbergasted. Down came the quarantine curtain on me and my building, which was a little bit tough to navigate. So I then found myself, okay, with 12 days ahead of me by myself, but very luckily in peace and quiet. And I felt so grateful because at that point, so far, I did not feel terrible and stricken. But of course, the narrative of the symptoms starts with the 20% worst case scenarios, which doesn't end up being the 80% of what most people have, that then becomes, of the least severe cases. So, and it's funny, I made a recording early on before they talked about it. And I said to the people on my Facebook page, I have this really weird side effect where I think I've lost my sense of taste and smell, and no one had started talking about it yet. And that was my strange indicator. I thought, this is very unusual. Mostly, if Corona hadn't been in existence, I would have told you, I just had the worst 10-day sinus infection I've ever had, and it really lingered, and it even gave me a kind of a fever one night. That's how I would have encapsulated it to something not in the Corona era. But what's funny about the virus, as you've probably heard many people say, is it tricks you along the way, and you think you're out of it, and you've turned a corner. And then you get 3 more days of just feeling like you've been, just sort of sucked out. Not terrible, not a huge high fever, but not yourself. And you just feel heavy. That's a way that I would describe it. I wasn't short of breath, but I felt breathless, as if it was just out of the ordinary. When I was over my 14 days, I thought, okay, here I am. My girls are safe. They're with their dad. He's happy to keep them in Montauk. They're learning. They're doing their remote learning. New York is grim and a mess. What do? I gave my plasma, and it was a good way for me to kind of start off. And now, if and when I'm armed with my negative test, I can take that and go give every 8 days in New York, in Hackensack, at Mount Sinai on Long Island. And I can kind of go back to my real life and incorporate giving up north, where I'll be able to be. I think that in circumstances like this, when push comes to shove and when people are forced to really slow down and not, their agendas aren't full, their schedules aren't full, and when they really have time to center and be mindful, that's absolutely the first thing that people gravitate towards. Their community, their village, the people around them. We're all of a sudden, instead of worrying about what great things we're doing, posting on Facebook, we're worried about each other's collective safety. And I was very heartened by that, for sure. And then I also, I came down, I've been at my mom's house for 2.5 weeks, which is so rare, but it's like it's the perfect thing to do in a situation like this. Everybody's hunkered down. Everybody's reaching out and checking in on people, and it's a really good time to sort of spend time with the people that you don't ever make enough time for in the real schedule things.
Thank you so much for telling your story.
Marcy, thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.